To protect myself and my family, I used an alias. I called myself Pearl, and then I took the DNA test. When my results posted on Ancestry, I was surprised to find out how many people in this world I am genetically related to. I went from being the ugly duckling to stumbling into Swanapalooza. But the thing is, I didn't care about any of those people because I was looking for just one. There was one match that held the key. It was to an aunt. And on her profile was posted the obituary of her father. I read through the names of all the survivors, including all her siblings, then used Google to do a quick age calculation to narrow it down. And then I looked at pictures of all those kids growing up over the years. And for the first time in my life, I was looking at pictures of a stranger and I saw myself. And I knew I had found my birth mother. Her name was Rose. And thanks to Google, I learned that she was a hospital administrator in Louisville, Kentucky. She'd been married twice and divorced twice, and she'd never had any other children. And she was beautiful. She had a smile like the sun, and I was so proud of her. But since that had been her sister's profile and not hers, it was not an invitation for me to reach out to her directly, and so I didn't. Shortly after that, I received a DM on Ancestry from one of Rose's cousins. This woman was really into genealogy research, so imagine her surprise when a person she couldn't place with a name she couldn't trace all of a sudden popped up as a close relative. So she asked me who I was. I responded with my story, which is the only one I knew and the only one I have the right to tell. I was born in 1972 in a small town in southwestern Minnesota to an 18-year-old girl who had come from somewhere on the East Coast to spend her pregnancy and have me. And then I was taken over state lines and adopted out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I told this woman, Susan, that if this matched the story of any of her cousins, to do with this information what she felt was best. She put it all together. And thankfully, her ethics very much matched my own. She had a deep respect for very hard decisions made all those years ago. And she had a deep respect for boundaries. And together, we decided that she would not tell Rose that she and I had connected unless Rose gave her a very obvious opportunity to do so. A few months later, Rose went to visit her family in Pennsylvania. When she was at Susan's house, she did bring up Ancestry.com. She said that she had always wanted to take a DNA test, but she'd been too afraid. To Susan, this was a sign, and she was prepared. When Rose left that evening, Susan gave her a gift. And she told Rose not to open it until she was back home in Louisville. She was alone, and she had poured herself a glass of wine. Now, Susan's mom had been Rose's godmother, and they were close. Susan's mom died within 1 hour of my DNA results posting to Ancestry. And for Susan, this was divine. So when Rose opened up that little box, she found a note tucked inside. on which Susan had written that this was a gift, a token of her mother's love for Rose, and also part of a message she felt her mom wanted Rose to have. And then she told Rose about me. She said she really liked me, but she didn't know much about me because I'd been using my alias, Pearl. She also told Rose that I was the mother of a 10-year-old girl whom I called Little Pearl. And in that box was a pair of Susan's mother's pearl earrings. Rose called Susan in tears and told her story. She said that she had always loved me, that she tried to find me, but because it had been a closed adoption, she'd only ever hit dead ends, and then she lost her courage. She told Susan that she still had the baby blanket I had been wrapped in after I was born, and that her mom had convinced the social workers against all protocol to let Rose hold me, which she did in that little hospital room for 3 hours until it was time to let me go. After I'd processed this, and it took a bit, I reached out to Rose via email. I began by introducing myself by my real name, Marit. Marit means pearl. And for Rose, I had always been the pearl of great price. I told Rose that I wasn't ready to talk on the phone yet. I wanted each of us to have all the time that we needed to take care of our hearts and to figure out what this all meant for us. I suggested we do the New York Times 36 questions to fall in love, because those questions are not just for lovers. And she agreed. And we began our correspondence. We took those questions 3 at a time, and we took our time, and it was perfect. That fall, I sent Rose my daughter's first day of school picture, and she didn't respond. Her job was very big. She was very busy. There had been times when she took a little time to get back to me, so I didn't think anything of it, but weeks went by. When she finally did get back to me, she apologized. She said she had not been feeling well and that actually she had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I called her right then. So the first time I spoke to my birth mother was when she told me she was dying. But in our way, I was with her through it all. I wrote her every single day, and she responded for as long as she could, until she couldn't anymore, and she got sicker. The very 1st of May, I got a phone call from her sister, who told me that if I wanted to meet Rose, which she knew that I did, the time had come. I had offered several times, but Rose wanted to be well again when we met.
well was no longer an option. And I knew that the choice was mine. The next day, as I was checking in at the airport, her sister called me again. And she said, Rose isn't going to make it through the night. And she asked me if I still wanted to make the trip. I said, tell her I'm coming. She will wait for me. I went straight to the hospital from the airport. And I walked into that dark room a little after midnight and spoke Rose's name. And that tiny woman who had been unresponsive arched her body out of the bed and cried out and reached for me. So I went to her bedside and I took her hand and I started talking. I told her how proud I was of her and grateful. And I told her what I knew of death, which was she was safe and everything was going to be okay. And as she faded, I told her that I loved her. And the room chilled. And I felt her spirit kin all around us, and I looked up and I saw them. And then I heard very clearly here and here that it was time for me to let go her hand because she wouldn't die while I was holding it. And so I did. And her body illuminated from within as she took her last breath. Just as she had done 50 years before, I also held her in a little hospital room until it was time to let her go.